Okay. So we've got 25 people. We'll give them one more minute and then we'll get started.
I was given my first command. I led my men straight into massacre. Instead, that's first hand. I made every mistake and felt the shame rise in me. And even now I lie awake, knowing history has its eyes.
Okay, so we can get started. For those of you who are just joining us, there are just slightly too many folks with us today to do a round of intros. So please put your name, affiliation, and pronouns in the chat so we know who's with us. And thank you for taking this lunch hour to be with us to go over your ballot. We hope that you have a snack or some coffee and some food and your ballot and you're ready to fill it out. For those of you who don't know me, I am Michelle Seiler. I'm the executive director of Clue Justice, pronouns she, hers, and we're just so excited to be here. So we're going to jump in. We're going to go for exactly 1 hour. And I know that I don't need to say this to you. We all know that this moment in our country's history is unlike any other. It is vital that we all vote early, those of us who can vote, for the protection of our families, our friends, and our siblings who can't vote. We know that everything is on the ballot in November at the federal level, from reproductive rights, LGBTQ rights, racial justice, workers' justice, healthcare, and on and on. So what we did for our voter guide, we pulled out the propositions and measures for Los Angeles and Orange counties that are most important to low-income workers, immigrant communities, and communities of color. We are not going to go through every single proposition. We are not going to go over judges that are on the ballot this year, but we are going to go over the ones that we feel really, really strongly about. Many of them are moral statements about our values. They reflect who we are and who we want to be. So today we have staff and community partners here to talk with us about some of these propositions. We're going to go pretty quickly. We have allocated about 5 minutes for each one. The first couple minutes will be the presenter talking about the proposition, what a yes or a no vote means, and then we'll have a couple minutes for Q&A after that short presentation. We know that we likely will not get to all of your questions in that short period of time, but please put them in the chat, and any questions that we don't get to today, we will compile them, get some answers into a Google Doc, and send it out to you. So keep the questions coming, and keep an eye on your inbox as well for the follow-up to the session. And so with that, I am going to ask, we have for Proposition 15, we have Victor Sanchez, Lane Director of Long Beach Coalition for Good Jobs and a Healthy Community, to talk with us about what a yes on Prop 15 means. Victor, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you so much. Victor again here, he, him, gender pronouns with Lane. Honored to be here with everybody to talk a little bit about Prop 15. We can go on. Basically, I mean, at the center of Prop 15 is that it closes a commercial property tax loophole and ensures that commercial property is assessed at fair market value. And so it's really righting a wrong that was instituted back in 1978. Fixing this would bring about $12 billion every year back to local municipalities for local services and for specifically public schools. It's huge. It's a big investment in our communities, and it's one that's sorely needed, quite frankly. It also provides one of the largest tax incentives in generations for small businesses by eliminating their personal property tax. And so there's not a lot of tax benefits for small businesses. This one provides a huge tax benefits for small businesses and does not impact them. And I think most importantly, one that we're getting a lot on the phone calls is that it protects all homeowners and renters by maintaining tax protections for all residential property. So if you own property, are a homeowner yourself, this is not going to impact you at all. We'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So basically what this measure is doing is trying to get corporations to pay their fair share. So only 10% of the biggest, most valuable commercial and industrial properties in California would bring about 92% of the revenue. So you can see that the aim is to have large corporations pay their fair share. I'll give you an example that's here on this slide, is that Disneyland pays 1975 land value. So they paid the same property tax rate that they did in 1975. Now, had they had their land reassessed to current market value, that would be approximately $20 million each year that the city of Anaheim would benefit from. That's a lot of investment that could go into communities, to services, senior centers, after school programs, and to public education. Next slide. And I do want to just emphasize here that only commercial property owners whose property is worth over $3 million will be reassessed. And so if your land is valued over $3 million, you will be impacted by Prop 15. Again, the vast majority of small businesses, I think the average from a report that just came out this past week says the average is about 1.6 million in terms of land value. And so the vast majority of small businesses aren't impacted. And again, I just want to emphasize that small businesses will get a tax break ranging from about $500,000 to complete exemption around personal property tax for their business. And then the next slide. And again, like, this is $12 billion coming back to our schools and our communities, much needed for counselors, for nurses, for teachers. These are things that are important to maintaining the health and well-being of our communities. It's really about equity, and that's really what Prop 15 is about. And so I'll leave it at that. If folks have any questions in the chat, I can definitely do my best to field them in the 2 minutes that I got left.
Great. Thank you so much, Victor. Do folks have questions on this proposition? Please put them in the chat, and we have a couple minutes to go over them.
I can add that the money, 40% will go directly to the education fund and 60% will go to local services. There's going to be very strict transparency and accountability measures in place. Obviously, I think with money coming forward, it's important that we make sure we're upholding accountability. So I'll add that as well.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, so we do have one question from Biff Baker. He's going to be phone banking for Prop 15. What is the answer to the objection that this money will go into pension funds rather than actual services?
I mean, really, this money is going to be going to what local community needs. This might be to recruit, retain teachers, county health workers, and other workers who provide services that the neighborhoods count on. And so a lot of it is capturing the money statewide and going back into local municipalities. It's really on us too to hold those local municipalities accountable in terms of where that new money is going to be going to. And so although we can't say directly that they won't go there, that's not the intended impact of this measure. It's really to kind of address community needs around services and education.
Great, thank you so much. Any other questions on this proposition before we move on? And if they come up later, again, you can throw them in the chat and we can send them out later to you all.
I see one quick question in terms of who is opposing it. I mean, you have interest, obviously, I don't know if you've heard of Pete Wilson. I think a lot of people might have, but there are a lot of folks on that side, Disney, Chevron, the big corporations that are throwing money into IEs to try and beat this back. They just dropped about $22 million in ad buys. And so you're seeing a lot of misinformation on TV about how this is going to impact small businesses and residential property owners. Again, it's not going to do that. So a lot of money at stake here in terms of who's trying to get this measure to fail.
Great, thank you. One other quick question from Ashley. When can I phone bank for Prop 15?
Well, we're hosting phone banks Sunday through Wednesday, essentially from about 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. You can do it from the comfort of your own home. What I can do is I can share the link with the organizers here, and they can send it on out afterwards, and you can go ahead and sign up, quick and easy. We'll get you trained up, and all you need is a computer and your phone, and you'll be good to go. Perfect.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank
No
you. Thank you,
problem.
Victor. Thank you so much.
Of course, anytime.
Okay, so we have someone from the Yes on Prop 16 campaign who will be joining us to talk about that proposition. Monica, are you with us already? I think she's not online yet. So I'm going to jump ahead and I'm going to talk about Proposition 17. So we are saying to vote yes on this proposition, and I'm going to go through what that will look like and why it's really important to vote yes. So a yes vote on 17 will restore the right to vote to 50,000 California voters. Currently, about 50,000 formerly incarcerated Californians who are currently on parole are legally not allowed to vote. They have, to be super clear, they've finished their prison sentences. They're now working, paying taxes, raising their families, but they're on parole and they are not allowed to participate in that civic process. So Proposition 17 will amend the Constitution and restore the right to vote to those formerly incarcerated who are also on parole. And as we know, this is particularly important right now when we're having this national and international reckoning about the ways in which our criminal legal system disproportionately punishes Black and brown people. So this one's relatively straightforward, but we have a couple minutes if folks have questions about this one before we move on. Please feel free to throw them into the chat. Okay. Rewrites the Constitution, California or federal? California Constitution. So this is a California statewide proposition, not the federal level. Yeah, good question. And again, it is for people who are currently on parole, who had previously been incarcerated. Any other questions? Okay, so I think Monica will be joining us shortly to go over Proposition 16. Let's see. Give her just a minute to join us. Monica, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, hi. Great. Thank you so much.
Sorry,
Right,
I've been trying to join at the beginning.
No worries. So Monica, thank you again for joining us. Monica Lazo is the coalition organizer with the Opportunity for All Coalition, and she's going to talk to us about what a yes on Proposition 16 means for California. Monica, I'll hand it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. So thank you so much for having me here. I just wanted to reach out and say, as we've known, affirmative action has been taboo. We saw mobilization in 1996. And during that time, unfortunately, there was a large group of Democrats that actually voted for 209. And now specifically because of the language that they used, the images that they actually used to promote the yes vote on this, right? So now is our time to correct that wrong, what we did. And what does that mean? That means that we are going to level the playing field for everybody. That means that everybody is going to have an equal opportunity, right? We're talking about and college admissions, this covers gender wage gaps. We've seen the numbers come in that show that women and minority-owned business lose about $1.1 billion a year in contracts. And why is that, right? Even when, let's say for instance, even when women do get the contract, they still make a lot less cents per dollar to the white man. So, you know, and it comes even lower as we get to Black women, as we get to Latina women, it's even lower. And if we were even to consider Native American women, that is extremely lower, right? So, you know, and a lot right now, what we've seen in the news, what we've seen in the media, and a lot of the opposition come at us, it's like the UC system, we're seeing a higher rate, right? However, it's been low. Since the passing of Prop 209, every demographic across the board has actually lowered in admissions. But when it comes to Black, Latino, and Native Americans, it's dropped even lower. So, and we've seen that there has been a higher admission rate for both Latino and Blacks at UCs, right? That's what they're saying. And they're saying this is big, we've got momentum. However, it's still low, and this is the reason why. Black and Latinos make up 57% of the high school graduates. However, they only make up 35% of freshmen this year. So that is still extremely low, right? If we look at that. So, and even if we look at the college transfers in 2018, 1/3 of the population at the college system in California are Black, Native Americans, and Latinos. However, they only make up 1/3 of the admissions at transfer students. So it's just like they make up actually over half of the population in the college system. My correction, sorry about that. So, but only 1/3 of them get in. So you see, and so this will equal that. And we're not saying that we want race or gender to supersede any other skill set. However, it should be a qualifying factor, right? It should be up there with GPA, with a diversity in the background. What experience are they bringing in to the campus? That's something that you want, right? And I've been in grad school recently, and I've been in the room where I'm at a grad level and I'm faced with people that have never had a job in their life. I'm just like, where's the diversity in this? Like we need that, you know. And so we also know, for instance, in K through 12 schools, that only 1 in 6 teachers is of color. So we see that staff is not representing that diversity within the state. And why is that? Because universities and schools cannot create specific programs that recruit minority teachers. They cannot create a program and say, okay, look, wait, let's see, we don't have enough Latino teachers. Let's create a program that specifically gears towards bring them in. They can't because of the ban on affirmative action, right? And the same thing with businesses, with state programs. If they realize that a lot of their programs are not going towards women, they cannot create a specific recruitment program for women because of the ban on affirmative action. So it affects us, and we see that as well in a wider range that many have even thought about, right? It's like doctors, you know, it's in the Latino communities. It's like, it's not just having a doctor that speaks our language, but it's also a doctor that understands our cultural norms, right? And we don't see that. We've seen that when it comes to nursing and medical schools, Latinos and Blacks, their numbers have dropped, you know, greatly. Like we're seeing it in an exaggerated proportion. So we see that here in California, which does not make sense because we are a diverse community. The minorities are becoming the majority, right? So it's just like, and how is that not represented in these roles that really speak up, that are essential in our communities, such as teachers, such as doctors, you know, and even at the university level, as for professors, we don't see that. I always share my experience of when I transferred, because I'm from East Los Angeles, and when I transferred to Cal, I decided to skip the class, the language, the second language course that they require. And somebody, a counselor said, you can test it at the university you're at. And I said, okay, perfect, I'll do that. So then when I did that, when I scheduled my test, the person testing me on the other end was a white woman. So here I am getting tested on my own native language by a white woman. So it was not, I don't have anything against that, but for me at that moment, it was a bit infuriating because I'm just like, wait a second, like I was born with this tongue, and this other woman who just learned it is going to test my skill set and my capacity and my understanding of this. So, and that's just me. But at the same time, we're looking at another range. I transferred from East Los Angeles College, where the counselor said, write everybody's number down in case you get that urge to, like, you get homesick and you want to come back, right? So it's just, we needed, because less than 3%, we're talking about less than 1% of the 3% that transfer from colleges and cities such as East Los Angeles actually graduate at a university as Cal Berkeley. So a yes vote on this will make sure that we have more resources available for students, that we have more professors that look like us, that make sure that we have more doctors that look like us, that not only speak our language, but that are actually from our, from that represent us from our communities, and that, that everybody has an equal playing field, that everybody gets the same opportunity. We're not asking for preferential treatments or anything of the sort. We're just asking for the consideration to be, for the consideration to just have an equal opportunity to show you our skill set, to demonstrate it. So that's what a yes on Prop 16 vote means. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Monica, for sharing your story and for explaining how important this is. Do folks have questions? Jackie Cordova is asking, how is this put into action?
Perfect. It's actually going to be one of the simplest things. We're just overturning the current ban on 209. So that just means that state universities, state businesses, what they have to do is they have to now open this up. So they now have to create these, do these internal reviews and check where they're lacking the diversity. And that's where they're going to go on and they're going to set. So it's just easily just overturning a current ban that didn't allow a lot of these institutions that wanted to, but couldn't because of the ban.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Monica. So if there are any other questions on Prop 16 now or later,
Am I too late?
feel free to drop them into the chat and we will include them in the document that we send out to follow up with you all. Yeah, thank you so much, Monica. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate your time. Okay, so we are going to move on now to Proposition 20. Joel Gerwin, lay leader with Bend the Arc Jewish Action, is here to talk with us about what that proposition is. Joel, are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, everybody.
Pass it over to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for organizing this, and thanks everybody for showing up. So I'm going to speak about the No on Prop 20 campaign. This is a terrible proposition, really important that it get defeated. And can I share my screen, Michelle? Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely. Go for it.
Great. Let me do that. So I just want to share an image to start out with, just to give a sense of why it's so important to defeat this proposition, because what Prop 20 would do, it would really worsen the problem of mass incarceration in our state. It would send more people to prison for longer periods of time. And that would impact, as mass incarceration does, communities of color more so than anybody else. So this photo is from 2006, but it gives you a sense of the terrible overcrowding that existed in California state prisons at that time, and which has continued to be a problem. And it's only this year, with the releases due to COVID and the recognition that you cannot keep people safe at the levels of crowding that we had, that we've gotten down to below, I believe we're below 100,000 inmates in the state system now, but we're still at above capacity of our prisons. So this situation that you're seeing in this photograph, these inhumane conditions, and that's what they were found to be by the court, led to some criminal justice reforms in our state, AB 109, Propositions 47 and 57, and Prop 20 would roll back those criminal justice reforms and take us back in the direction of sending more people to jail for longer. And I'm going to put up a slide that shows a little bit specifically what the proposition would do if it passes. I want to apologize. There's a yes on 20 logo on this sign. It just gives you a little bit of a sense of the people who are pushing this and what their message is. They say it supports the police. So what are some of the specific things this proposition would do? It would reduce the threshold for felony theft. So it would, in order to be charged with a felony, right now you have to steal something worth at least $900. It would reduce that to $250, meaning that you could be charged with felony for like stealing a bicycle, for example. And it takes a whole, there's several crimes that are not chargeable as felonies right now. They're chargeable just as misdemeanors, and that was part of the reforms we've had, that it would now be chargeable as felonies if Prop 20 passes. So that's one thing it would do. The other thing it does is it changes the people who can be considered for parole. So right now in the prison system, you can take classes and participate in programs to rehabilitate yourself and to try to prepare to be integrated back into society when your sentence is completed. And this proposition would take 51 different offenses and classify them as violent, meaning that you would no longer be eligible for parole once you've completed your primary sentence. So a lot fewer people would be able to participate in these rehabilitation programs, and would be a lot fewer people would be eligible for parole. That's part of the advertising. They say like, I can't believe that this crime isn't classified as violent in California, and they're trying to work on people's emotions, like date rape should be classified as violent. But what they really mean is that people who commit those crimes shouldn't be eligible for parole even after they've served their primary sentence, participated in rehabilitation. As a religious person who believes in the power of forgiveness and in the power of all of us to change ourselves and to try to correct our mistakes in life, I find this part of the proposition particularly offensive and problematic. It also would reincarcerate people potentially for minor violations of their parole and probation terms, like failing to report for a meeting. And it would also mandate DNA collection for a bunch of misdemeanors. So all of a sudden you shoplift, and under this proposition, that would mean that your DNA would get collected. So what are some of the impacts of these kinds of changes that the proposition would lead to?
Sorry, Joel, if we can just do this quickly, because we're about it.
Okay, we're out of time. Okay, so it would just add a lot of costs to all of us to pay for putting these people in jail, and that money would come out of programs, healthcare, social services, community-based programs. So with that, I will stop. Thanks for giving me the heads up, Michelle, and I apologize for.
Yeah. No worries. This one's really, really important. Thank you so much for sharing that information.
I'm just going to put in the chat a link if you want to get involved in the No on 20 efforts.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, and if there are questions on Proposition 20, we can take a quick 30 to 60 seconds now, and if there's more, we can send it in the follow-up doc. If anyone wants to. Okay. All right. I'm not seeing anything pop up. So thank you so much for taking the time, Joel. I super appreciate it. And we'll share this link too in the follow-up materials. Yeah. All right. So moving on, I am going to talk for just a couple minutes about Proposition 21. A yes vote on Prop 21 will allow local jurisdictions to enact rent control in Los Angeles and Orange County specifically for us. So currently, I'm sure you all know some about this, more than half of all renters in the state of California, so more than 3 million Californians, spend more than 30% of their income on rent. And this meets the federal definition of rent burdened. You know, everyone, you know, we all know it's recommended to spend less than that percentage of your income on rent. We also know that homelessness rises faster when renters are rent burdened for obvious reasons. So 21 will modify the Costa-Hawkins Act, which was a 1995 law that restricts cities' abilities to enact rent control at the local level. And it will eliminate the statewide requirement that rent control cannot be applied to housing built after 1995. So that's a little confusing, but in Los Angeles specifically, as of right now, you cannot regulate rent in buildings that were built after 1978. I am lucky enough to live in a building that was built in 1975, and I could not afford to live here if that was not the case. So this is really, really important. It also imposes new rolling rent control, which essentially means that housing units over 15 years old would now be eligible for local rent control policy. So essentially, you know, rent control has been on and off the ballot for many times in California, but this really just gives local jurisdictions more control and more power over these laws so that they can enact rent control that will protect renters. And that is obviously really, really important. So those are the sort of the nuts and bolts. Are there questions on this one? It's not quite as straightforward as 17, but.
Yes, I see one question from Cynthia. Why are ads against Prop 21 supposedly featuring veterans who are opposed to it?
I do not know the answer to that, Cynthia. I haven't seen those. I will do some researching and get back to you on that, because that is confusing. I'm not sure at this point. I'm sorry. Yeah. Any other questions on this one? Okay, great. So next up is Proposition 25, and to talk with us about what this proposition means, we have Ricardo Hidalgo, from the Director of Organizing from the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. Thank you so much, Ricardo, for being here, and I will pass it over to you.
No problem, Michelle. Good morning, or I should say good afternoon to everyone. The only thing is it's not 25, it's 22. I'm
so sorry, Prop 22, yes.
No worries. No worries.
Yeah.
So I want to give folks a little bit, because this one, it's probably one of the most controversial ballot measures that we've seen, at least in the from a labor perspective. But I want to take it back, because a lot of people don't know where this stemmed from. This stemmed from, it's a complete response from Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Postmates, all the gig companies, in response to AB 5 that was voted on and approved and signed into law by the governor last year, and took effect January 1st of this year, where also that AB 5 came from what's called the Dynamex decision. That what that is it's just the test the state of California uses to determine what is an employee and what is not. So what happened is, traditionally, and I should say historically, and previously and now for us in the trucking industry, the test that was applied by every agency in the state of California would use what's called the Borrello test. There was a decision that went up to the state Supreme Court, Dynamex, a case involving a trucking company named Dynamex, where they were appealing a labor commissioner's decision on wages, stolen wages, and a bunch of stuff. It was a wage claim. So the state Supreme Court actually decided not only in favor of the labor commissioner, yes, they have jurisdiction, and yes, these are employees, but also said, you know, the Borrello test, it's actually maybe too complicated. Let's narrow it down to 3 questions. So going from 14 questions to 3 questions is what, you know, AB 5 brought into effect. You know, just really making it very clear and simple on what an employee is or isn't. So of course, when Uber, DoorDash, and Postmates and all the app companies seeing that this was a real thing and it's happening, they quickly, even before it came into effect, my video is off. Thank you for telling me, folks. Before it came into effect, they were raising money and talked about this ballot initiative, and threatened with it. Just so you'll know, currently they've already spent $186 million on this ballot initiative. It is expected to be, and currently is, the most expensive ballot initiative in the history of the United States of America. And what it is, Prop 22, the law is what it is. And what these gig companies are doing with Prop 22 is asking for an exemption from the state of California. Basically, those employee laws and what employee mandates and what it determines to be an employee shouldn't apply to these gig workers. That's what they're saying. So it would literally give these gig companies an exemption where they would not have to recognize their workers as employees. And just for food for thought, not only has there been multiple class action lawsuits against Uber and Lyft, which are the 2 biggest ones, right? But there's a bunch of those that follow. The state of California is one of them, but also the Attorney General of the state of California has filed a suit against Uber and Lyft as well for misclassifying their workers. And recently, in August, a Superior Court judge ordered Uber and Lyft to start recognizing their workers, their drivers, as employees. But of course, they do not, right? Uber and Lyft does not want any of that. So not only does it give them an exemption, it steals the basic rights of these employees that they've already been determined to be employees. Like I said, right, the gig companies, they just want an exemption. So this would deprive them, right, from paid sick leave, workman's compensation, unemployment benefits, right? And of course, the safety nets of Social Security, Medicare, or unemployment insurance benefits. But to us from labor, it also strips them from the right of forming their union. And, you know, we stand in solidarity, and I know CLU does as well. And we're standing in solidarity with the Alliance for, Mobile Workers Alliance is what it's organization, right? That, you know, they intend to form their union, and which they should be in all right to, and the law says that they should. So to us, right, this is a very easy one, right? Voting no is the way everyone that cares about workers' rights. It's an easy one to us. However, in the recent polls, I think Berkeley and the LA Times came out with the newest one. It's pretty neck and neck. Right now, it's at 39% of the people that they interviewed, they polled, said they would vote for Prop 22, and 36% said they would vote no on Prop 22. So this is a big deal. I know the Teamsters and labor in general throughout the state we're phone banking, we're getting out the vote. We did a little drive-by caravan protest at one of the Lyft hubs in the Arts District in downtown LA. You know, we're going at this because not only is this, you know, this, and be clear, this is specifically for gig companies, right? App-based workers, drivers, this specifically. And however, in this industry, we feel if they're successful, this is only going to open the door to a company in other industries that have the money and the power and the will and the stamina to create such legislation to ballot and put them on ballots. So to us, we want to give, you know, make sure that we send a good solid message, not just to Uber and Lyft, but to all corporations and companies that take advantage of workers and misclassify the workers or intending to misclassify the workers, that the American people aren't going to allow that, right? So us in California, we have the first stab at that. So I'm open to any questions. I think, like I said, this one's a pretty easy one to me. If there are any questions.
We are at time, but maybe we can quickly answer. Lisa has a question. Has there been a poll against Uber and Lyft by their drivers?
Yes. And like I said, right, the evidence is The Mobile Workers Alliance they have rallies. So I would say there's a little bit of a division amongst the workers themselves as well. You know, there are some, and you see them on the commercials. Some of them, I want to stay as an independent contractor because it's some people, yes, depend on it for very little hours a week and it just suits them. However, the vast majority of them, and the ones that I know of, are solely dependent on this, and this is a full-time job, not some part-time job. There are more full-time drivers than part-time drivers, right, that really depend on this, and that's what this is about.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Ricardo. Thank you so much for taking the time. If there are other questions on this, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll include them in the follow-up materials. And now we have our very own faith-rooted organizer and pastor with the Church Without Walls at Skid Row, Pastor Q, to talk about Measure J and Prop 25. Pastor Q, I will pass it over to you.
Indeed. Thanks for having me, everyone. Prop 25, I think I'm going to start with that one first. Obviously, we have been fighting against the cash bail system for a long time. And it is inherently classist, racist, and unfair. And of course, people with generational wealth can afford to pay their way out of jail while awaiting trial, but poor people in the exact same legal circumstances with the same statistical likelihood to appear or not appear for trial cannot afford to pay their way out. And the bail bonds industry is designed to exploit this problem and these people, right? And so it kind of works like predatory lending, a similar strategy for exploiting Black and brown communities. And, the bail bond industry or the cash bail industry is no different. So those who support this particular measure says that's why they want to get rid of it, because of what I just shared. But for some of us, it's tricky, right? The bail industry, we're saying we shouldn't switch to something that is not working, right? For an alternative that's no better and potentially more costly. And they're going to use algorithms to determine who should or should not pay bail. And we know we've always said that junk in when it comes to algorithms in these systems, whatever you put in, that's the outcomes that you get out. And those outcomes are already biased to begin with. So when you use algorithm, potentially what could happen is that more people can end up in jail as a result of passing Prop 25. So we decided, and there's stark differences on both sides, and there are even advocates who support this. We don't support it because we don't want an alternative that is no better, right? And so we're saying no. We can start from where we are, because we know this is a result of SB 10. We can start from where we are, and we want to move forward, but not with an algorithm or anything that continues to perpetuate the same cycle. So that's why we say no. Any questions or comments?
Thanks so much, Pastor Q. Any questions? I don't see any in the chat.
Okay.
So yeah, folks, if they come up later, feel free to, okay. Victoria's asking, what do you mean by algorithms?
Well, it's basically a system that they use to determine basically who will, it's a database, and it's a system they use to determine who they think will show up for trials, who's more dangerous than others. And obviously a lot of the things that they use, everything from when you talk about algorithms and all of these other systems that they use to determine whether certain people are more violent or different things like that, or will appear to trial or not, those things are inherently biased because the person who's actually entering the data is probably biased, right? And that's how we got to where we are now.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Pastor Q. Okay, so we will send out the other questions with our follow-up materials, but let's move on to Measure J and what a yes on Measure J will look like.
Yeah. And so a yes on Measure J means J for justice. When we say J, we're saying J for jobs, right? Or we're saying justice is on the ballot and jobs are on the ballot. LA County spends 42% of taxpayer money on law enforcement and the legal system. That is $1.7 billion. We're saying that we want at least 10% of LA controlled taxpayer revenue to go or to be invested into communities for alternatives to incarceration. Some of that money is going to go towards direct community investment. That means increasing funding for community-based youth development programs, provide career training and jobs to low-income residents, create access to capital for small minority-owned business with a focus on Black-owned businesses, provide rent assistance and housing vouchers to those who are at risk of losing their houses or those who are without stable housing. And this is, for me, is kind of personal, because at our church, at the Church Without Walls in Skid Row, we have what we call a microloan program, and we've used that to help keep people in housing, right? 1.3 million people were at risk of being houseless prior to COVID-19. And when I say 1.3 million people, I'm talking about 1.3 million working people were at risk of being houseless because of housing unaffordability, housing unavailability, and poverty, right? So we have working poor. I think I'm hearing some noise. So if you guys could hold on, I'm going to close the door so we don't hear so much noise. 1 second. My apologies. I hope that sounds better. And then it would also create, it would increase funding for community-based restorative justice programs, right? It would increase support for pretrial non-custody services and treatment. It would increase life-affirming community-based counseling and mental health wellness services, and a myriad of other things. Any questions on that? As we talk about reimagine public safety, that's one of the ways we reimagine public safety, by reallocating our resources. We know that the safest communities are not the communities with more law enforcement, but the communities with more resources. And those communities have been underfunded and ignored for years. And so we want to make sure that we can mitigate this issue that we've been having, that we've been trying to rectify for decades and haven't been able to do.
Thank you so much for that, Pastor Q. There's one question about this. How does this measure reallocate funds?
Obviously, it's going to put aside 10% of the county's budget, 10% of it towards this measure. And like I said, it's going to allocate it to all of the services that I just mentioned.
Yeah, and so with the percentage, this year 10% is one number. In 5-10 years, it'll be a different number. But the percentage, my understanding is that the 10% is the goal for right now.
10%, and it could end up to be somewhere around, I think, over $1 billion or something.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Pastor Q. Again, any other questions on that, drop them into the chat. And now we are going to move on. Those are all of the propositions that we wanted to cover today. So now we want to hear from you all. What is your voting plan? We've been sharing instructions on how to vote in this incredibly weird, complicated, challenging time. And so we're hoping to have a poll to see how you all are going to vote. If you're going to vote by mail, in person, Dropbox, or if you don't have a plan, in which case we can help you think of one. All right. See the responses coming in here. Most of you are going to Dropbox. Beautiful. Few of you are going to vote in person. Vote by mail. All right. So mostly Dropbox. Awesome. And I don't see anyone that says they don't have a plan. So that's great. So hopefully you can take this information, transfer it over to your ballot, and put it in the mail as soon as possible. Take ballot. Yeah, there might be some long lines at the polling places on election day. I am guarantee there will be. But there are drop boxes. I've seen them popping up in my neighborhood, which is great. Okay, so most of you are going to do Dropbox and vote by mail. Awesome. Thank you so much. And now we are going to just briefly go over a couple of resources. So make sure if when you're doing mail, you're mailing it in or you're dropping it off, you need to sign the envelope. I almost always have voted by mail. So for me, this is sort of habit, but you don't actually sign the ballot itself. You sign the back of the envelope. Make sure it doesn't get dirty. We don't want ballots being thrown out because people can't see the signature or something stupid like that. Okay, next slide. And yes, so in person, make sure to look up your polling place. Some of them with COVID, I think, have moved, but there still should be plenty of places for you to vote in person. And you can start on the 24th of October. So you can start early. And last slide. And California has a ballot tracker. I've been doing this for this election, and it's really easy to use. You can sign up to get texts and/or emails about where your ballot is, and you will get alerts about when it's been counted and all of that stuff. So if you go to that website, and we can share this with you all afterwards, you can sign up to get updates on your ballot via text and email. And thank you for coming. It's so wonderful to see so many of you on here. I know we went through these all really quickly, so if you think of questions that we didn't cover for any of these propositions later, please feel free to email myself or Ashley or Mary, and we will get back to you. And I am going to ask Reverend Jana Louie to just close us out with a prayer and a blessing.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting this. Would you all pray with me? God, we bless you and we thank you because you're a God of wholeness and you are a God of justice. We also come and we confess that many of us are weary and exhausted because we live in a broken world and broken systems with unjust policies. So God, we thank you for your invitation to participate, God, in your justice and in your work in this world through our votes. We ask that you would bring justice, that you would bring equity, that you would bring peace to our world. God, we do pray for clarity and wisdom, especially for community leaders as they educate our communities in voting for propositions that would bring about justice and equality in our local communities. We pray, God, that you would help all voters to remember the vulnerable among us. We pray that you would help us to stand in solidarity and mutuality with workers and with those in our communities who don't have the ability to vote. God, we thank you for our community organizers. We bless you for who they are and for their work. We pray that you would give them energy and rest also as they work towards your justice in this world. In the holy name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. All right, everyone. That is a wrap on the Clue Ballot Party. Thank you again so much for joining us. Thank you to our presenters, and a huge thank you to Mary and Ashley, who took the lead in setting this up and reaching out to all of our wonderful partners who are with us today. We so appreciate it. And we will see you. We will see you soon. Take care.
Say what must be said. I'm ready for this day. Whatever lies ahead. Gonna take a leap of faith. Take a deep breath. Gonna give this all I've got. With every bit of strength left, I don't wanna turn around and see I never tried. 'Cause we've only got one chance to stand for what is right. I'm gonna stand for those who need it. I'm gonna rise above the noise. Be the voice for all the voiceless. Speak the truth, you speak the truth. 'Cause I was made for this. I was made for this. I was made for this. I was made for this, for this, for this.
Thank you so much, Clue Team.
Thank you, Reverend Young, for joining
Thank
us.
you. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
being here.
Very, very good meeting. Thanks for that session.
Thank you.
Oh, great. Okay, so who's left? Oh, Rabbi Einstein's still with us. You're muted, Rabbi Einstein.
Oh, here I am.
Hi.
Hi. A candidate just came by to have me put up his sign on my wonderful lawn that has about 10 signs now. So
Your lawn is in my inspiration.
yes, it's amazing. Thank you very much for this event today. It was very good. Reinforced a lot of the research that I did.
Good, good. Thank you. I'm so glad you were able to join. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. Yeah, and this is you know what? This is another one of your many skills. You know what? Maybe they should put you on the next Trump debate, because so far the